Hello, and welcome to the Employment First Advisory Partnership Podcast. This is Catherine Carroll, your host for the moment, and Katie Talercio is behind us, helping us do the production parts of this podcast. We have a wonderful guest today, Jenny Siegel. Jenny and I met surreptitiously through a complex rehabilitation technology webinar, and my daughter Mikkel, who also uses a chair, was part of that, and we just found that we had a lot of things that we found really interesting. And when I heard more about Jenny's story, I thought she would be a wonderful guest for Employment First, and really illustrating how sometimes the systems can work together, but also the types of jobs that people can get. And so welcome, Jenny.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to share my story and get to speak with you some more.
So Jenny, you have a pretty sexy job. Let's just kind of be out there. And if you're in fall in Bronco land, and sports, Denver's a huge sports town for our listeners out of state. Jenny is in the heart of the sports world. And I think what is so amazing to me about this is she's a woman, for one thing, and she's a woman who uses a wheelchair, and she managed to get into some pretty cool places. She and Mikkel both talk about how they've met Russell Wilson. I think you know Russell Wilson a little bit more than Mikkel, but she did meet him and stuff. So tell us about this fantastic job you have.
Well, I actually have one full-time job and essentially two part-time jobs. So my full-time job, I work as a sports producer for Altitude Sports. It's a regional sports network here in Denver, Colorado. And we are the TV home of your Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche, the Denver Nuggets, the Colorado Mammoth, and this year, the Colorado Rapids. We wrap up our contract with them, but we're the TV home for them currently as well. And then I also produce a lot of our original programming. Right now, I'm producing a betting show. So we have You Bet College Football, You Bet Pro Football, and then once the seasons get underway for the Avs and Nuggets, we will have You Bet Tonight, which encompasses all sports. So that's my full-time job. I've been with Altitude since 2006. So I've been with them for quite some time, and I absolutely love that job. But probably one of my favorite new additions is I do work for the Denver Broncos. I work for the Denver Broncos on their PR game day staff. So last night I'm up in the press box, working the game. I got to see that awesome fourth quarter comeback, which was so cool. Russell Wilson finally looked like Russell Wilson, which is what we're all talking about right now in the sports world, that we finally got a glimpse of what everybody's been so excited about. And being able to see that in person last night up in the press box working for the team was very, very, very cool. I've been a Broncos fan literally my entire life. So doing that job is 100% a dream job for me. Saying that I get to drive to Empower Field, and that's my destination for work. It's literally a dream job for me. Love Altitude, love doing that, but it has a special place in my heart that I actually get to be a hometown girl working for my team, which is awesome. And then I also do work for the Colorado Rockies. I am a replay operator for them as well at their home games. So whenever Charlie Blackmon goes up to bat and hits a home run, I'm the one that replays that back on the big Jumbotron. And I edit highlights throughout the game, and then I play those up at the end of the game. But I'm editing throughout the game, doing replays, being involved that way with the Rockies. So I definitely have my hands in most of the Denver sports in one way or another, which is very cool to me.
I think at least half of our audience is going, I want that job. This just sounds like the coolest job ever. And certainly, as Denver sports is so amazing right now that it's a really fun time to be a part of that. And I was sweating bullets. My son and grandson do a text stream throughout all of the sports, the games. So you can imagine the texts that were going on after
Absolutely.
the game. So anyway, so for you out-of-staters, it was a tight game. We've got a new team, basically, and a new owner, new coach, new manager, new quarterback. So we all have stars in our eyes. We're always thinking Super Bowl, but Jenny's right there in there with all the people that are making this team happen. And it really is an amazing job. So Jenny, how did you get this job? Tell us a little bit about your journey from, I've got one of the coolest jobs in the universe to many jobs actually in the sporting world, to how did you get this? I mean, that just didn't pop in. You've got a certain skill set that I'd love to talk about, how you learned the technology, but I'd also like to hear about your journey on how you got here to this wonderful position.
Yeah, for sure. Well, growing up, I was paralyzed at 9 months of age from transverse myelitis, which I am AC4, C5 quadriplegic. So growing up, I always thought I was going to be a doctor. That's what I always envisioned I would do, because I was so grateful for everything that everybody did for me in the medical field, how they helped me, get on track. That was something I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to do the same thing for the next person. But sports has always been an absolute true passion of mine. I've loved sports for as long as I can remember. I can remember sitting on the couch with my dad every Sunday watching the Broncos game. And as I got, around 6, 7 years old, I started watching the game in a little different way. Like, I was very analytical. I would talk about players. I would talk about plays. I would talk about, how things are developing with my dad. I wasn't just, his buddy on the couch. We were having these pretty sophisticated sports discussions, which that's kind of how I thought, sports could be something that I would love to have in my life all the time. And with being paralyzed, there's a ton of adaptive sports out there, but I just couldn't play them at the level that I would like to. Like when I entered high school, all I wanted to do was get a Letterman's jacket. If I could leave with a Letterman jacket, that'd be the best thing in the world to me. And so I decided to manage our women's JV and varsity basketball teams as a way for me to earn that letter so that I could get my letter jacket. And that was honestly the best decision that I ever made. And I'm incredibly grateful for those coaches and those players, because not only was I their manager, but they 100% made me feel like a member of that team. Wheelchair, no wheelchair, it did not matter to them. They wanted me to travel on the road with them. I would go to every game. I'd report statistics to the news after the games. I was very involved with the team. And so that just was very eye-opening to me that, hey, sports can be involved in my life, just maybe in a different way than me playing. And at that point, I was in high school and I had to start thinking about my next step in life. And like I said, I always thought I was going to be a doctor, but also with my disability, my hands don't work as well as I would like them to. I don't have the strength. I don't have the range of motion. So the more I thought about it, I was like, well, I don't know if a medical career is the way I want to go because of that reason, but also because I just loved sports. And I figured out, hey, there's another way for me to be involved with sports. So I decided to go to the University of Northern Colorado, and I majored in journalism and mass communications. I had a minor in speech, and that opened the door for me to work in the journalism world. And so when I graduated from college, Altitude Sports had just launched. They launched in 2004. They were a brand new network. And also at that point, I was Miss Wheelchair Colorado. So I took a year off after I graduated so that I could fulfill my duties of speaking and traveling. But I still wanted to keep my hands in the sports world. I had done internships throughout college. I did an internship at 9 News. I did an internship at WB2 News. And so I just wanted to keep my hands in the sports world. So I was very lucky at Channel 2. They were willing to let me stay on as a acting associate producer. So they let me stay on during that year when I was serving my reign as Miss Wheelchair Colorado so that I could stay active in the journalism world. But I also made some connections along the way. When I was doing some fundraising for Miss Wheelchair Colorado, I met the CEO of Altitude. And I let him know, hey, I just graduated with a journalism degree. My dream job would be able to cover sports here in Denver. And I always thought I wanted to be the person in front of the camera. I wanted to be the person delivering the headlines, delivering the news. And that was what my hope was when I graduated from school. So I fulfilled my reign as Miss Wheelchair Colorado. And after that, I was really pursuing jobs. And I applied for jobs literally all over the place. And I wasn't getting any bites. And that was actually, discouraging out of the gate. I was like, man, I want to just get to work. I want to do this for a living. This is what I want to do. And I'd always check in with Matt Hutchings, the CEO of Altitude. I'd check in with them about every other week, just, check in. Hey, I'm still interested. Do you guys have anything? And unfortunately, with them being such a new network, they didn't. But fast forward a year, I get a call from their coordinating producer and they said, hey, Jenny, I know you really want to get in here with us and we would love to have you. I don't have any openings, but I have an internship to basically be my right-hand man, my assistant. Would you be willing to take it? And at that point, I was just like, man, I've already done 3 internships. I want to make some money. I want to move out of mom and dad's house. Like, I want to start my life, you know?
Mhm.
But I didn't let my stubbornness get in the way. So I accepted the internship. And that was the best thing I could have ever done for myself, because that internship turned into a freelance gig, which then turned into a full-time gig. And then when they brought me on, they wanted to bring me on as a production assistant. That's kind of like an entry-level job in the journalism world. But when I was a production assistant, I did a ton of producing, and that's what they wanted me to do. They said, we think you are perfect for producing. You have the sports knowledge. You can work with people. Like, producing fits you to a T. And at first I was like, I don't know if producing does, because you have to be like, you have to have a very strong personality. You have to stick to your guns and say what you want and make sure things get done on a certain schedule. I mean, you're basically, as a producer, you're in control of an entire production. So if I didn't, if I wasn't strong in my beliefs and my opinions and making sure things got done, then things wouldn't get done. And at first I'm like, I don't think I have that personality for this. But they gave me the opportunities. I produced a bunch of shows for them, and it ended up being the best thing that had ever happened to me, because I love producing, and it gave me my start in my career. And then I also built off with the Rockies, because I was a host usher with them when I was in high school and college, and I just met connections through there. They had an opening to work for Rockies Vision. I applied for it and I got it the next day, which turned out really well. And then with the Broncos, just because of their relationships that I've formed by working over there at altitude, going over there to request interviews and working with players, I got to know the PR staff. So I was able to get my foot in the door with them as well. So it's been a long journey for me, but I wouldn't change anything about it, because it brought me literally to my dream job, and I get to do it every day. So I feel incredibly lucky for that.
That's an amazing journey. It really is. I love the tenacity. And I had a friend who ended up being in journalism, and she worked at 9 News as an intern too, and she ended up going to LA. She just left her position after 24 years. But you have to be willing to do those in entry-level positions when you're going into these industries, and so people can begin to trust you. But I love this story, and I think for a lot of our job developers, employment specialists that are listening, that staying in touch and being a relationship driven person is really the key, because it doesn't just pop into your lap. Sometimes it's really about, people want to know that you're going to be there. And especially in today's market, I think you really want to show that you're going to be showing up time after time, because people leave pretty easily these days. And I think having that sense of commitment is going to be a more attractive opportunity for people with disabilities who are seeking employment, because typically we know that a lot of people will stay in their employment for a long time, maybe longer than a person without a disability. So let me ask you this: how did you get any support from Voc Rehab or any other along your journey to help you get your education?
Absolutely. Like I said, I went to the University of Northern Colorado, and I did go on a lot of academic scholarships, but Voc Rehab did also help me with room and board, and they did help with my books and supplies. And I had to keep a certain grade point average, which I was able to do that, which was not a problem for me. I had to keep it above a C average to be able to continue to get their assistance, but they helped me throughout my entire college career. They did my freshman year of room and board, and then they did help me with my books and supplies throughout the rest of my time, because I lived off campus after my freshman year. But they were very helpful in that respect. And then when I graduated, I wanted to learn how to drive, because when I was in school, that wasn't a priority for me at that point. I wanted to go straight from high school to college, and learning how to drive was going to be a process for me. And when I was going through that time in my life where I was learning how to drive, I went through Craig Hospital, but they did not have all of the high-tech equipment that I needed to learn how to drive on. So I had 3 choices of the schools that I could go to. I could go to the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, I could go to another school in Florida, and then another school in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. So I contacted all 3 of the schools, and the school in Johnstown, Pennsylvania was the one that got back to me first. And so Voc Rehab was very instrumental in that process for me, because I needed a car to work. I needed a car so that I could get to and from the studio every day. And then also as a producer, a lot of days don't look the same for me. Some days I might start at the studio, but then I have to go drive to the Broncos training facility to get interviews, or I have to go over to the University of Denver to produce games. I'm very rarely in the same building all day for work. And so driving was going to be a key component to the success of my career. So they helped me fly back and forth from Johnstown. I had to go out there once in the beginning for an evaluation. Then I went back a couple months later, stayed out there for 2 weeks so that I could go through their driving program. So they helped, get me out to Johnstown both those times, helped with the cost of hotels and food, and then the driving school itself. And then once I got back to Colorado, they helped me get my first vehicle. I bought my first van. I bought the van itself, but they helped with the modifications for the driving equipment in my vehicle. So they were very instrumental along the way for me.
That, and I think listeners, we've got to look at all those resources, particularly when you're in a wheelchair. I mean, we used from my daughter, her PASS plan. She had a plan for achieving self-sufficiency, which is an SSI benefit that you can do that encourages work, but it was a set-aside program. So she could set aside some of her earnings to pay for the wheelchair and still maintain her benefits. And we listeners, just an FYI, we have, if you're kind of wondering about some of these benefits, you can definitely go to the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation website. You'll see an awful lot of really good information on there. They've really done a good job of making their information much more accessible and updated. And then also you can go to the Colorado Office of Employment First for additional information. We have for benefits, which is always tricky. And maybe you can talk a little bit about, some of your work-related experiences with that and other supports, is that you can go to Disability 101, db101.org, and I think put Colorado in there because there are several DB 101s around the country, but we do have a Colorado specific, and we'll put the link into the description here. But that's a way you can play with a calculator on it. You can say, I'm going to make this much money and how's it going to affect my benefits? And it'll give some suggestions. We do have access to benefits planners here in the state. So we'll have more information about that during our podcast year so that you can have an understanding of how that works. But did you receive any other additional supports for your work, work related, help at getting to work, or some of those things that we find are around personal care, particularly if you're in a wheelchair?
Absolutely. Well, the driving was obviously a key component for what I needed for my transportation, and I can drive myself, which I'm very grateful for. I can be independent in that respect, but I do need caregivers. I need caregivers that come in the morning, caregivers that come in at night. I also have PCP, personal care provider hours, to help me with food preparation and cleaning of the home and all of those things. And so I've been on a program, CDOS. I've been on CDOS since 2005, and that's been a very big blessing for me because that allows me to manage my caregiving system. And that's obviously, that is a Medicaid program that I get because of my Medicaid benefits, that I'm allowed to be on CDASS. And it's been huge for me because it allows me to hire the people that I want to hire. I can decide their wages. I can set up everything as long as I work in with my own monthly budget. And that's been a huge blessing for me because working with home health care agencies just really doesn't work for the things that I need. And I learned that when I was in college. I was grateful that I got the support that I did from those home health care agencies, but that was really my first taste of home health care because growing up, my mom did the majority of my care. So I didn't really have the taste of that. But when I was in college, I definitely got the taste of what it's like to have somebody not show up and they can't fill the shifts and the frustrations that go along with all of that. So being on CDOS just gave me the flexibility to hire the people that I feel will be a good fit for my life. And I've had a lot of success on that program. So that's been something, without that, I wouldn't be able to go to work every day. I wouldn't be able to do the things that I need without the benefits that I get with CDOS. And then also when I first started working, I was on the 1619B program, and that allowed me to make a wage, but still protect my benefits. So I was on that for quite some time. And now I'm on the Medicaid buy-in program because that allows me to make a little bit different of a wage and still keep my benefits, but I pay a premium for my Medicaid every month. So that's how the Medicaid buy-in program works. So that's how I'm able to still get the benefits that I need, but I'm also still able to work at the same time. And that is something that I was always kind of concerned about when I was getting into the work field. Like, how am I going to stay under my resource limits? How am I going to do these things? Because without Medicaid, there's no way I can, I can't do anything. I can't get my monthly medical supplies. I don't get my CDOS benefits, so I don't get caregivers. I mean, there's so much that goes along with Medicaid that I had to figure out how I can make everything work together. So the Medicaid buy-in program is what I'm currently on right now, and it's been a great fit for me.
We're very fortunate in Colorado because we do have these tremendous, Medicaid buy-in program. Our Medicaid services are fostered through the healthcare and public financing are pretty robust and person-centered. Not every state has that, listeners. So if you're from out of state, you may say, well, what are these things? And it may not be the same in your state because Medicaid does vary from state to state. It's a federal program, but it's up to the states on how they administer those programs. And if you are on like the IDD waiver, intellectual and developmental disabilities waiver, consumer direction is fostered through or managed through that case management system there, but there are things that are outside the spending limit that you can access that do not take away from your supported employment support. So it's this navigation part that is really interesting, and we'll probably spend an episode just on the tricks to navigating a complex system. But as you can see, listeners, or hear, Jenny has done a very good job of figuring that out. Did you have a lot of support from your family around all this? It sounds like your family was pretty involved.
I'm extremely blessed. My parents have always been there for me since day one. And I love that the attitude that they instilled in me, they never cut me any slack because I was in a wheelchair. I had the same responsibilities, the same expectations as what my sister had. I had my weekly chores. I had things that I had to do, and things were never going to just be given to me because, oh, Jenny's in a wheelchair, she deserves this. It was the exact opposite in our household. I had to work for everything I got. So whether that was school, whether that was a job, whether that was anything, but I couldn't be more thankful for my parents because they were the ones that gave me that fight in me before I even know how to do it before I even knew how to do it myself. But they're also so supportive along the way. I mean, everything that they have done for me. I was the ambassador child, one of the ambassador children for Children's Hospital back in 1991, and taking me to all these different events. And when I was Miss Wheelchair Colorado, my mom traveled with me throughout the country. We went to so many different events and speaking engagements. When I was in high school and I managed basketball and soccer, part of the deal for me to be able to go on the road with the teams is that one of my parents had to ride on the bus with us. That was just a legality thing that we had to work out. And my parents never missed a game. They always made sure that they were there to be on that bus with me. And even the home games, they didn't just drop me off and pick me up. Like, they stayed at the gym, they cheered on the girls. Like, they've by far been my biggest cheerleaders, and I couldn't be more grateful for everything that my parents have done for me. They've been in my corner for day one.
Yeah, and and that's a similar experience to my daughter Mikkel. She has had, one parent that's really been supportive of her throughout. And, it isn't always available for us in how we see it, but if we can make it happen, and we kind of create it as we go. We've talked about job creation. Well, there are opportunity creations. And I think families really want, for the most part, for their kids to be very successful. They Absolutely. Some of them are afraid of failure and people not having what they need. But I think, developing that kind of endurance to keep persisting and, okay, we're going to get through this problem. We're going to get through this problem. And eventually you get to the place that you really enjoy. And that's clearly evidenced in your life as well. So kudos to your family for doing that, and for the schools that you were part of. I mean, it really is a team effort when you kind of do these things. And I know my son went with my daughter to Washington DC on the 8th grade trip because somebody had to be there.
Right, exactly.
And, you just do those things so people can experience that. And some families are not available to do that. And so we help the families that can, and then we look for creative ways to support the families that are not able to be there in the same way. So I think we keep doing that. But I think when you have family engagement, it really is an accelerator to this whole employment process. And so for our listeners, we encourage you to connect with the families and discover what they can do to support an individual, and particularly with the turnover issues that we've talked about. Jenny is absolutely right. Consumer directed attendance support services is the name of the program. And particularly if you have physical disabilities, that's an available program. It is really an amazing program. We love it too. Mikkel was an early adopter like you, and it's a life-changing program. And so I would encourage you to connect to the Healthcare and Public Financing website. I think it's hcpf.org or no, .gov, sorry, .gov. And you can check out the waiver programs there, and that would be where you could find that. And it's a pretty easy process to get connected to if you're so interested. So let's talk technology, because our field's a little behind on the technology. I think what we found is that COVID kind of accelerated us at least 10 or 15 years. So it kind of pushed us into an area that we didn't go running towards. But what kinds of technology do you use? You're obviously a high performing person. You get a lot done. You've got 3 jobs. You're working for very demanding organizations who are time sensitive in their output. How do you do that?
Well, I do a lot of it with basically the same type of equipment, the next person would use. I don't have a lot of adaptive equipment that I use in my daily life, especially for work. I have a laptop. They were actually able to get me a Surface Pro, which is a great laptop for me because I used to have like a bigger, bulkier laptop and I couldn't transport it by myself. It was too hard for me to lift, put into a case, put it in my vehicle. I couldn't do any of that stuff. So getting me a Surface Pro seems like a very minimal thing, but it's been huge. I can slide it in a computer sleeve and I can take it with me wherever I go. And it's something that I can easily do on my own. I edit on a program, Adobe Premiere. I edit a lot of my shows and videos on that. And that's just a normal program that everybody, has access to. But
let me interrupt you real quick here. So you have because I do some editing on the podcasting, and it's there's a lot of cut and pasting and moving the mouse around. How do you do that, or do you use a drag and speak or something like that? You just able to do it?
Yep, I just do it. I just use the trackpad on my laptop and I type on my own. I mean, that is one thing that my occupational therapists at Craig Hospital have encouraged me to consider to start using. I am stubborn in the respect that I want to keep doing as much as I can on my own for as long as I can. And my therapists look more, down the road and like, Jenny, if you overdo it now, you're going to have a lot of shoulder problems. You're going to have a lot of those things. So those things that I need to get better with because I want to just do as much as I can by myself. I'm a very independent person. And so right now I'm still doing things, just typing on my own, using the track pad on my laptop. I'm still doing all of that kind of stuff on my own, but eventually I do think I will have to transition into, like a Dragon Naturally Speaking program, a dictation machine or a program. I think that would help me out a lot when I do more long forms of content. But when I build shows, it's really easy because I just do it like in a Microsoft Excel rundown format. So that's pretty easy for me to type up and do on my own. But one thing that they did adapt for me in the studio is I have to be able to communicate with my talent and my entire crew when I'm producing shows. So we're all on a headset and I have to communicate with our whole crew. My talent wears what's called an IFB in their ear, and that's how I'm able to communicate with them during the shows, tell them to transition to the next topic. We got to go to break in 2 minutes, all of those types of things. So I can't put a headset on and on by myself. That's something that I struggled with. So they got me set up with a microphone, kind of similar to what you see on the screen here, but it's something that's attached to what we call an RTS panel. And that's how I communicate with all the different positions throughout our control room. And they set that up for me where the microphone is just on there. So I don't have to wear the headset on my head, because every time I would have to leave the control room to go to a different part of the building, go talk to my talent, I'd always have to ask somebody to take it off and put it on for me. So that was one thing that they did set up for me. And then where this RTS panel is usually located, it's mounted almost at the very back of the front benches that we sit on at work, and I couldn't reach those. So they made like a nice little box for me where all the buttons are right accessible, and it can be pulled as close to me as I need it to be. So that was key for me when they set all that up, because that gave me the ability to produce confidently in our studio.
So from what I understand, you're just Jenny at the studio. You're not Jenny in a wheelchair. You're not all that special. You're just very talented, and they've come to depend and count on you. Is that true?
And to me, that's the biggest compliment that I'll ever get from anybody is, you're not Jenny in a wheelchair, you're just Jenny. And that's all I ever want in life. I just want to be Jenny. I don't want to get things because of my wheelchair. I don't want to not get things because of being in a wheelchair. I just want to be Jenny, and I just want to be successful based on what I can do, what my abilities are. And that's my coworkers have told me that a couple of times, and still right now I get a little teary-eyed about it, because that's what matters the most to me, is that people don't think of me as Jenny in a wheelchair, and that they just think of me as Jenny. And that's my ultimate goal, no matter where I am or no matter what I'm doing, is I just want to be Jenny.
That's so cool. Now, I think that speaks to inclusion. And, for many of us, we are focused on inclusion, but obviously this is an inclusive environment that you're working in, and it's successfully happened. And not just from a corporate statement perspective, but this is somebody who feels included in their work environment. So as listeners, as we're trying to help people with different disabilities become employed, we really do want to look for those cultures that are open to inclusion. And they may not know how to do it, but they've got to be open to doing it, because this is the result of it. So just two more questions for you before we sign off. One of them is, for our listeners out there, in terms of working with a person with a disability and maybe having some support through a vocational rehabilitation counselor like you had, it sounds like you had a really great one. But do you have, for people who work in the field, what would be your advice to them to help somebody through their success path like you've been able to do?
I think the main thing is, don't be afraid to ask for things, because there are resources there that can help. And just not only as far as like a resource, meaning a book rehab, which is a great resource, but talk to coworkers, talk to bosses. I've learned so much, and it's a lot of because I am stubborn in some respects, but people are more willing to help than you think that they are. People have no problem wanting to, assist somebody. Like when I had to have somebody put my headset on and take it off, I felt like, oh my goodness, I'm just really inconveniencing these people. And they're like, Jenny, we're happy to help. It's not a problem. So I would say, don't let those things hinder you. Don't let those things stop you. And, me going into the field that I was going into, I knew it was going to be a lot of work, because not only am I a woman, but like you said, Catherine, I'm a woman in a wheelchair. So I felt like I had even more to prove. And I think it's good to come in with that attitude that, hey, you do have a lot to prove, but you want to prove it in a professional way. I think that was one big thing, that I never wanted any slack for any reason, whether I'm female, whether I'm a female in a wheelchair. I just wanted to prove that I belonged. I had the knowledge, I could do the job, I could do it well. So I think it's going in with a certain attitude as well. And then just showing what you can do, showing what you can do. And I think that's going to be so eye-opening for a lot of employers, because sometimes they do think, well, I'm not sure what this person can do. And I think you need to be your own advocate and say, hey, I can definitely do this. Do you want me to give this a try? How about this? I mean, because sometimes people just, they don't mean it in a wrong way, but they just don't know what to do. So you got to be your own advocate, and you need to put forth like, hey, this is something I want to try. Can we try it? Or this is something I want to do. Can I do it? Because that they might not know what you can and can't do. And that's up to you to prove it. And I think that's what's been a big part for me at Altitude. And that's why I feel lucky, because I've been there for so long, that I've established really good relationships with not only my immediate coworkers, but my higher ups as well. And they know what I want and what I want to do. And they're always willing to give me those opportunities. But that's because I've expressed it. And I've said, this is what works for me. And this is what I want. And if without me saying that, they might not have given me those opportunities, not in a negative way, but they just didn't know. So I think being your own advocate is a huge part. And then start anywhere. Start anywhere. Don't think any job is too small. Start anywhere. I mean, I started out as a host usher at the Rockies because I wanted a summer job, and my parents told me I had to get a summer job. And I didn't want to work at the mall. I didn't want to work at the food court. So I wanted to work around sports. And that's what I got my first job for. And even though that's not what got me my job with the Rockies, it definitely got my foot in the door of the organization though. And I got to meet those people. You never know where these relationships will take you. Throughout all my internships, I can't tell you how small of a world the sports journalism world is. I crossed so many paths with multiple people that I'm so grateful that I established good relationships with them. So you never want to burn bridges, because you never know what that person could do for you in the future, or who that person knows, or how it'll help you in the future. So I would say, don't think too small is too small. Just take every opportunity that comes your way and always be eager to learn.
Absolutely. For me, it has been being on boards and councils, because you meet the decision makers and the power people right away, and they open doors. And if you've got a problem, you've got somebody that you can call. So I think, going that extra mile or so to do one more internship, look where it turned out for you. And it wasn't your dream, but it was like, I'm still going to be willing to learn and see what this can teach me. And it led you to this amazing place. So what's next for you, Jenny, as we wind up? What would you like to do next in your life?
Well, sports obviously is a very, very big passion of mine, but I also want to continue to build my brand and get my story out there and really help others through motivational speaking. That's something that I've always had a passion for ever since I was pretty young. When I was an ambassador child for Children's Hospital, we went and visited a ton of youth camps, and I worked with a lot of kiddos. I did the same thing as Miss Wheelchair Colorado. I just really want to be an example for people to know that, hey, dream big, live your lives, still do the things you want to do. Your path might not look like mine, but I want you to know that there's a path out there for you, no matter what that is. If it's whatever job it is that you want, I want you to pursue that job. Don't be scared to go off to college. I mean, that was the biggest change of my life. I had never lived away from my family. My mom had always done my care for me. We did start transitioning me out of that a little bit my senior year of high school, so that I did have caregivers coming in so that I could get used to that aspect. But moving away that was a big thing, not only for me, but for my family, and luckily I didn't move out of state. I was 50 miles away, and the wonderful support that my family is, the couple of times I didn't have a CNA show up, my mom drove, the hour one way to meet me at campus to get me ready so I could get to class. So don't be afraid to take those chances. I mean, things are going to be a little bit more difficult, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. And for me, if it's even a little bit more difficult, I feel that much more accomplished when we get past it. So don't let those things hinder you, because there are so many options in the world.
Absolutely. So now, listeners, we go to conferences. That's what we do in this business. So I think Jenny would make a fine keynote speaker at your next conference. And so, Jenny, where can people learn more information about you?
Well, I have my website, jennysiegel.com, just like my full name, no space, just jennysiegel.com. And it has some videos, some examples of either podcasts that I've been on, speaking engagements that I've done. It shows what my journey has been like through the sports world. It shows kind of how I grew up with a disability. It just kind of highlights everything that is my life. And so jennysiegel.com is a great place to go, and I can be contacted through my website there.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that we have a link to Jenny's website in the description here, listeners. But as you can see, why we were so excited to have Jenny on the podcast, because she really has, she has taken us on a quite a journey. And next time I see a Bronco game, I'm thinking about you.
Well,
So,
thank you.
and I'm not into the other sports quite as much, but I do appreciate the sports perspective that you give, because it's an amazing job. And I love the fact that you got your communications degree and that you were supported through the process, that through voc rehab, and so, and your message of just keep going, keep asking, keep talking to people, keep exploring is, I'm sure, has served you well in your job, and makes you a great producer. So anyway, everyone, thank you. Thank Jenny. And we look forward to our next episode in the coming month. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine.
You're welcome.